and I saw this the other day, was like, as an agent, you really should step back and say, hey, if I had to hire myself and compensate myself, would I, right? What do I offer that consumer over the other agents that they could work with? And I think that's going to be a big question that most agents are going to have to look themselves in the mirror with and say, man, like, am I really doing the things I should be doing to get compensated the way I'm compensated?
Episode 11, Behind the Gate. Got my good friend Bryan Colquitt here with me. We are going to be discussing the lawsuit around real estate today. It's been a hot topic in the news. We've seen things like my personal favorite, real estate lawsuit settlement upends decade-long policies that helped agents set commissions, which I think is blasphemous, but, here and there. So we're going to be discussing all those things, going through it, but let's go ahead and introduce Bryan, again, Colquitt Realty. Thanks for being here, buddy.
Thanks for having me, sir. I'm excited.
Awesome. Let's dive right into it. What's an overview of this lawsuit? It's been a ton of misinformation. Me and you've had some conversations. I feel like we keep a relative good pulse on things that are going on. Yeah. So let's talk about what the overview is, some of the misinformation going on, and obviously nothing has been settled yet. Yep. So there's a lot of opinion-based conversation.
A lot.
But let's go into that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the overview is it's a lot. It is a lot of information. And I think the funny thing I always tell people, I think many people think this popped up 2 months ago, but in reality it started back in 2019 when the lawsuit started to take place, I should say. But the overview was, basically a couple home sellers came together and through attorneys and conversations felt in other states, and I will preface that, and I know we'll get into that difference between here and North Carolina, but other states that they were they were put into a situation where they felt like they didn't have a say as far as what they paid buyers agents, and they felt that took away from their pay, and they were, basically just kind of brought that to the case and went from that. And then I feel like it's just been, since then, it's just been added on and added on and added on. You look at all the copycat cases and things like that, but in essence, that's what it was. It was a group of homeowners that sold property in Missouri and came together and said, hey, we feel like this real estate commission is kind of, set fees, and we feel like we're getting screwed on the whole thing, and they're taking money out of our pockets, and we want to go against real estate agents and get part of that, the piece of the pie. And of course, from a money side of things, the attorneys were like, yeah, let's go do it. There's a lot of money involved there. Let's go make some money ourselves as well. So, and here we are today where I think finally, as you know, the NAR finally, after, months and months and really years of battling back and forth, and basically said, you know what, hey, we're going to settle for $418 million to go towards those homeowners.
I think that, well said. And it turned into just kind of this big antitrust lawsuit, and you honed in on it a few times. Yep. Price fixing, yep. Right? All these big companies, these big box brokers. I won't call anybody out. We respect for all of them, not business practices and everything in between, conspired to set a fixed commission rate. Yeah. And everybody's heard 6%, and I think that's been the headline. 6% are a way of the past. Like, how do you feel when you hear that? Because when I hear that, I'm like, well, there have been times I've listed at 6%, and there have been times I've listed for more, and there's been times I've listed for less. Yeah. What does it say to you when you hear somebody say, "Oh, you've conspired to fix a commission"?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes. There's a lot of things that come to mind. I think frustration. I think there's a lot of humor behind it as well, because, like you just said, I think many of us in the industry know that there is and there isn't. There's a cloud over here that's kind of a standard fee, but we can go to MLS right now and go through the last how many transactions and see that there's not a standard set, right? It fluctuates over and over again. And as you said, you've done some for 6%. You've probably done some for a little bit more. You've done some for a little bit less. There's never not a, hey, this is the set fee that we charge, right? Mm. But I'll tell you, the humor side comes into, and this is, I've said this to a few people, is I think the thing that gets me about this whole thing is, it's like real estate agents as an industry are the only business owners in the country that are not allowed to kind of say what they're will be paid, right? Hey, you look at attorneys, they're not normally negotiating their fees most of the time.
I'm $300 an hour.
Yeah, you
All right,
know,
cool.
you look at many other professions. You're not going to a doctor. You're not going to, name any type of professional service industry, and they're not going in and negotiating their fee, right? But yet here we are as real estate agents, and we, you look at the time we put in and the hours and late nights and things like that, but yet we're not supposed to kind of say what we want to charge for that, right? And I think that's where the whole, I don't say confusion comes from, is like basically when you begin a relationship or, with a client, whether a buyer or seller, you state that fee up front, at least here in North Carolina. And most people have an understanding of, all right, cool, here's what you're going to get paid. Here's, I'm going to be with you for the next, month, 2 months, sometimes year, whatever it is. But you as my agent, here's what you're going to get paid for that time and for that service of, helping me. So I think it comes back to a lot of humor. If really came out of this whole thing, like the amount of headlines and articles, and I mean, you talked about it. I mean, I hate to say, but even real estate professionals, like just seeing some of the posts that they even say about it. I just think, the facts are the facts, but at the same time, there's just a lot of misinformation that to me is just comical.
It is comical, and we'll come back to our fellow professionals who probably by the end of this episode are going to be like, man, I hate that asshole, Andrew. What was he talking about?
Most of them already do. It's okay.
I mean, thanks, Brian. I appreciate that. So before we kind of get into how we think that's going to affect the consumer, like you hit the nail on the head on so many different things you said. It's like, we've talked about this. Okay, well, let's bill by the hour. Let's go that route for a real estate.
Which is what when you talk about this was what the DOJ kind of proposed in the beginning.
Yeah, and I'm glad NAR stepped up, because DOJ was about to step in and just kill this lawsuit completely. And their ideas, to me, were blasphemous. Yep. So I'm glad, I won't say that many great things about the NAR right now, but the settlement, I think, when it comes out, if the things that are supposedly written to happen somewhere around that, I'm glad they stepped in and just kind of got us past this. And it's, I lost my train of thought because I got to think about how much I hated the NRA right now. NAR, excuse me, not the NRA. My bad. My bad. I did a Second Amendment. I did not mean to infringe on that. I apologize.
That's podcast number 12.
Yeah, well, that's next podcast. But it is, and it's like, let's charge by the hour.
Yeah,
but Brian, how do I charge you for every text message I respond to? And I'm not going to sit on my high horse. This is what we do. It's what we chose to do. I love my clients. It's why I respond as much as I can. But how do I put that on paper? How do I put the knowledge that goes into understanding competitive market and helping my clients win, and the efforts we put into building the relationships from the lenders, the attorneys, the home inspectors, and everything? It was crazy to get a house. You had to give a kidney.
Yep.
Yet you saw similar agents continue to win. Yep. And it wasn't because their clients were paying $100,000 over asking every time, or 50, 75, 100,000. That was the easy way.
Yeah.
Right. And then you ran into problems on the back end. The agents that continue to win, and I think you won quite a bit, were the agents that continue to carry value. And you can't put an hourly price on what goes into that in our industry. Yeah. And if we did, I don't think the consumer would want to pay that either. No. I think they'd be going, okay, would you used to charge? Okay,
we'll go back to that.
Let's just go back to that. Yeah. So I'll digress on that. Consumer impact, this has been touted. A lot of the preliminary conversation is saving money. And I will say this, I kind of had a rude awakening going into this when people were posting things on Facebook. I kind of had this idea in my brain where, oh, my clients got my back. And I'm not saying they don't. I haven't talked to them all individually. My clients got my back. My social media is going to understand. The general public's going to be like, no, real estate agents have value. But man, it was like as soon as somebody was like, their money's gone, everybody's like, fuck yeah, get them. Get them, take they're overpaid clowns. And I was like, whoa, dude, it was surprising to me. So consumer impact, what do you think?
Yeah, I'll start off the top. I think me and you talk about this as well, as I think overall, once it actually settles, and this is something that you can go both ways, but I think it'll be better for the consumer from the value proposition that agents have to step up, right? And I think there's been a lot of confusion for years and decades behind, is the real estate agent valued from the consumer standpoint? And I think we know this, and I think from the real estate industry, it's overpopulated from an agent count. And I think the good agents, like you mentioned, a second ago, have always been there, right? The ones that provide value and the ones that go above and beyond. And, save the consumer thousands and thousands of dollars from both sides of the transaction. It's the poor agents and the ones that, now I think probably have to maybe work on their value proposition a little bit but again, I think overall, when you look back on it, I think consumers now are going to be a little bit more educated up front. I think the conversations that they're having with their agents, going to be a little bit more, detailed, I should say. I think there's going to be more questions asked from a consumer versus, I'm going to use, Andrew because I've known Andrew since high school, whatever it is. I think now when you start looking at, hey, should I be asking certain questions to Andrew about, is he the best fit to help me purchase my house or things like that? So I look at things like that to where from the consumer level, I think they're going to know a little bit more about their agents and what value they actually bring. And to me, again, I think it's a good thing. But I still think overall there's still going to be, and this is where the confusion comes in is, there's no law in place that requires you to use an agent. And I think people, the people like you were talking about on Facebook of like, yeah, go after agents. Like, you didn't have to use an agent in the first place. You chose to use an agent, right?
Yeah.
And you look.
Let's pause there real quick.
Yeah.
On that note, and I love that you say that because nobody's required to sign any agreement that we put in front of us. And you talked about this earlier. We'll come back to it. North Carolina's paperwork is comparably to what I know in the rest of the country, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on contract law. But from what I've heard is pretty stringent and done well. So kudos to North Carolina for the forms they give us to allow us to really work transparently, comparative. But like, it's you don't have to work with a real estate agent. Yet I think the statistic is still 92% of people will. Yeah. And some of that is probably because a friend told them to, or it's just what I've always done, or my brother, mother, cousin is a real estate agent. I'm going to help them out. But I think the reason that statistic remains so high, even in a technology industry driven world, is there still is a lot of value to having a real estate agent. Yeah. And statistically, you either save or make more money by having that person alongside you. Yeah. I interrupted you. Continue. I'm sorry.
No. I mean, you're spot on, and I think you're right on the stats. I mean, I look at this. I think NAR just every year they publish their home buyer and seller reports, characteristics behind them. And it was last year. There was for sale by owners was only 7% of the overall transactions. It means 93% of the people are still using an agent, right? And you look at the value behind that even further is you look at the national average. The national for sale by owner sells for $310,000. And those that use an agent sell for $405,000. So that's a lot more than just the 5%, 6% fee that they feel like they're saving. It comes down to the negotiations. It comes down to, hey, what updates should we make into the house and what should we not do and things like that. That the value of the agent really comes into play. And I think, and again, it's just a list of things. And I think when you think about the typical consumer that's going to buy a home or sell a home, right? They've got lives. They got, they got a career. They got kids. They got family. They got soccer. They got all this stuff. But, they're relying on us to look over those contracts. They're relying on us to, send them properties and kind of dissect an inspection report and help them out and stuff like that. They don't have the time to do those things. So they look at it as, hey, yes, I will gladly invest in a real estate agent and pay those fees because I don't have the time to do that, And this is kind of off topic somewhat, but you look at some of the headlines I laugh about is, U.S. needs to be more like other countries, and Australia's for one of where they only have, they don't pay buyer's agents, right? And I saw this, it was actually on a podcast recently. It was very funny is that those in Australia, like people were saying, yeah, let's do that. Let's go that route. Homeowners or the sellers are the only ones that need to pay. And then the buyers, buyer beware. And this interesting stat was 30% of the deals in Australia fall through. Right? Compared to the U.S., I think it was less than 10%. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, from a homeowner's perspective, that's going to list your house and sell your house. Do you really want to go in that uncertainty as far as like, hey, yeah, we got a contract here. It looks great, but there's a 30% chance that the deal falls through. If they're wanting to move, they got to pack up. They're trying to purchase their next house and things like that. And that's where, again, the value of a real estate agent comes into play because buyer beware. How many times do they see an inspection report and they see, whatever it is, and it's probably a $20 fix and their uncle says it's a $5,000 fix. A good real estate agent's gonna be able to say, look, just had that done last week or whatever it is, and it cost I can get a contract over here next week to fix that for $50. Yeah. It's not.
Or I'll just take care of it.
Yeah, or I'll take care of it. Yeah, I've done that many times. Yeah,
I can get my guy to come by tomorrow. Like that's fine.
No sweat. We got bigger issues to worry about. I'll take care of that for sure.
And I love that you hit on that because so often when I'm sitting down and been thinking about this lawsuit and how am I going to talk to my clients, especially my particular sellers, that when I'm sitting down with them, and how am I still going to tell them that there is a reason that you should be considering or offering some type of buyer agent compensation. Now, however we do that, whether we let them negotiate that, and we can talk more on that later, or however that comes about, it is still my firm belief that it's not just about them being compensated well. It's about the months prior that they've put in with that client to make sure that that client is ready to buy. That client's working with professionals, lending, and whatever else, and their years of experience in this. Because the last thing I want to do, typically my sellers got a reason to sell. Yep. Sometimes it's they want to cash in. Sometimes they need to move. Yep. Whatever it is, typically they have a reason. Yep. So deals falling through can be in a timeline. Yeah. Deals falling through can be a detrimental thing.
Yeah, big time.
And I want to know that somebody like yourself is on the other side of that. Not to push the deal through, but just just reassurance. Sometimes terminating is the way to go. And sometimes terminations happen and you can't help it. Yep. Sometimes people lose their job. Sometimes the house just really is trash and it's not the right thing for them to buy, or it's just not the right thing for them to do. That being said, we help people get out of their own way. And sometimes that's an invaluable trait. We can remove ourselves from the emotions of it. And I think as we continue down this path, like the value is not always just in the negotiation. Yep. The value is helping these transactions hold together, because I don't want my seller to be 2 weeks from making hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of moves and lining up moving trucks and all the other stuff that goes into it. And then all of a sudden I got to call them and be like, well, I know I told you we didn't really need to fix that leaky pipe in the kitchen, but we've come to a crossroads and that buyer's going to walk away now. It's like, nobody wants to make that call. Yeah. And rabbit hole.
But still, even on the senses, as you were saying those things, what's popping in my mind is, and then exactly how you said that too, is there's a calmness behind it, right? Yeah. And I think, again, there's way more value that comes into a real estate agent. But when that deal is going south, right, it's the agent that has a calmness and understanding that, hey, look, no big deal. We'll get through it. Here's how we can do it. We got option A, B, and C, whatever it is. It's the agents that maybe don't, again, we're not going to get into this whole, but the commission breath agents and things like that are just focused on the deal closing. They're the ones that are freaking out alongside their clients as well. And then you got two people freaking out. And next thing you know, the deal is falling through, right? So you got to have that professional from a consumer standpoint. I want to be able to compensate that person that when things do go south, I have that agent beside me that stays calm, understands how to navigate through it, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And again, that's why you hire a good attorney. That's why you have good accountants and things like that. Good real estate agent is the exact same thing. It's not just opening the door when you want to look at a house. It's not just sending you over the contract and say, hey, sign this. It's all those things that encompass a good agent. And again, I think that's where the shift of what's going to be, again, the agents need to get better from the consumer level of things and consumer confidence. I think once they start seeing that, hey, I really do have a good, professional, competent agent on my side, I will gladly compensate them for whatever their fee is, because I understand why that's important. Yeah. And then backtracking a little bit too, as you're speaking as well, was you really look back at, again, buyer agency hasn't always been around. You look back in the early 90s. I think buyer agency here was at 95 or something like that. They really stepped in and they started adding, hey, consumers are purchasing homes. Consumers are purchasing homes. I think it's 95. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's 95.
We're going to go with 95.
But again,
1995.
But again, it was buyer beware. That's where that term came along, because a lot of consumers were purchasing houses. They didn't have representation of an agent on their side, and they were walking into issues. They were closing on deals that, hey, should this have been disclosed or was this not disclosed? And again, from the listing agent perspective, like, I don't represent you. I represent my seller. I'm looking out for their best interest.
Which everybody did.
Yeah, you didn't have representation. That was your choice, right? And then again, as more lawsuits started to stack up of buyers suing from that perspective, and I think that's where the comical side comes in. Now we're saying, oh, well, wait, now they're not as important. We're like, we went through all these other lawsuits in the early 90s because buyers were being hoodooed and screwed on different deals and stuff like that and didn't have the representation. Mm-hmm. Now we are being compensated, and that shouldn't be allowed as well. So it's like, what side of the part, do you want to kind of stand on?
On that note, and I will say before I forget this, I think the consumer impact is going to be positive.
Yeah.
I think that the real estate agents that continue to thrive in this industry will be the true professionals. Yep. that can bring value and understand what that value is, regardless of the price behind it. And you said one word, options. It's about options. People want options, right? You go into a restaurant, you want to be able to have some options.
Yeah.
You know, it's nice to have like 7 different things to choose from, and those 7 things are really, really good, right? But that consumer still wants to be able to look and just have some options. Doesn't have to be a ton, but you know, I'm in the mood for this today, or I think this is for me, yada, yada. So the agents that continue to thrive will continue to have more and more options. There's no way to just put this industry in one box.
Correct.
And so I'm curious to see what those develop and how different people have different options and what they are. And then this is the comical part to me. And I don't mean this in any disrespect to anybody, but it just goes to how you see things and what you immediately think. All right. We're gonna use some standards here.
Yeah.
You know, whatever. For the sake of conversation. 6%. Bryan, I'm going to charge you 6% to sell your house. Cool. You agree to sign the paperwork with me. I go through where that money goes. 6% comes to the firm. I take 3% of that as a firm owner, and I offer that to a competing broker to bring us a qualified buyer. Do you understand that?
Yep.
Cool. You understand that. All right. Life is good. Now, you, Mr. Colquitt, as a listing agent, have now... You're going to go help. I'm going to go help this buyer, this seller go buy a home. And now I bring them to one of your listings, and it's kind of a similar deal.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe that listing agreement was for 5.5 and you're offering 2.75 to me. Okay. And I come in, that seller pays that. It kind of churns. Like, did my seller really lose any money?
Correct.
To get the representation?
Yep.
Not really. Okay.
Offset.
A potential new way of doing business. All right, I have that conversation with you. We're no longer paying the buyer agency commission. The consumer has spoken. The world has spoken. We're not going to do that. It's up to you. They can negotiate it. You want to pay it. You don't want to pay it, whatever. My listing fee is 3%. Do you agree to pay that? I agree to pay that. Cool. We signed that up. All right. Now you go to buy your house, and I go, hey, on this side, you know, I have a minimum, maximum. You know, but 3% is my fee to help you buy. You know, you agree to that. We have to have that before I even show you houses. Blah, 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 blah. You buy your house, come to closing, and you've paid me 3% on most likely a more expensive home.
Mm-hmm.
You've netted less money in the transaction. So there's just so many different ways to look at this from a compensation standpoint, which brings me back to a lot of the headlines, saving the consumer money. Yeah. Is this going to save the consumer money? I don't think it does. No. I think it gives them a higher level of service, though.
Correct. Well, and again, I think it started as saving, you know, and again, that's just a headline, but I think you look at it, let's just say what it is. And then deep down, this is kind of, again, backtracking a little bit. But at the end of the day, my belief is that in many ways, this was nothing more than a money grab for many attorneys, right? They knew when you really break it down to simple thought processes, most people are going to agree with exactly what you just said. Like, yeah, that doesn't make sense, right? You're still going to pay it over here versus paying it when you list the house, whatever it is, right? But again, it's a money grab, right? I kind of lost my train of thought as well as far as what you're saying too. But like, I think it's
because we keep really beating around some of the things we really want to say.
Yeah,
to be PC.
And again, here's what we didn't say this in the beginning when we were talking about the overview. When we speak about what's changing, right? What is the overview? In reality, here in North Carolina, right? There's 2 things that are basically changing. Of all the 100 some pages of the settlement, there's 2 things that impact us here as agents in North Carolina. It's now, as you were just speaking, offer a compensation within MLS, right? So before, if I was your listing agent, I'm helping a seller, and I go to, you know, we'll just use your reference. I'm charging you 6%. I'm going to charge you 6%, and I'm going to offer that cooperating broker compensation of 3%, right? I'm going to list that in MLS so that it can be advertised so that all agents know that, hey, this homeowner is willing to compensate you if you bring a buyer to this property and go into contract when close, right? It's offer compensation. They're willing to do that. That is going away. We can no longer put that within the MLS, right? So that's probably the biggest thing. Well, I'll say one of the biggest things. The second thing is, you know, we haven't spoken about this yet, is buyers, right? Here in North Carolina, again, buyer representation has always been there. It's always been an agreement. It had to be in writing prior to the offer to purchase, right? So before you go to make the offer, you could have looked at 20 houses, right? And there's some strategies, business strategies. Some people they do it before they show houses. Some people wait till they offer to purchase. The law is, by the time the offer to purchase is presented. had to have a buyer compensation agreement and stating that I, as your agent, I'm going to be compensated this, whether the seller pays it or not. You're going to compensate. Here's my fee. And ultimately, if you buy a property in MLS, you're going to know up front before we put in an offer, because I'm going to be able to tell you, hey, that house we're looking at, you don't have to worry about paying my fee because the seller's offered compensation. But now that's changed, right? Because now that compensation is no longer MLS. And now before, the new rule as far as the timing side of things is now it's before I even show you a house. Because I think the DOJ wanted that transparency up front and saying that, hey, all consumers know before they even kind of start the process, what are they going to have to pay? And I think that's before where I think, and again, it's poor practice standards, but I think many agents probably kind of in a way skipped over that part on sometimes. And again, the good agents probably didn't. They shouldn't have. But I think a lot of consumers probably, they were kind of, I think the typical thing is, I don't have to pay the buyer's agent because it's offered. In reality, it was still a contract because, part of our buyer agency agreement is I'm getting compensated this, whether you buy on the MLS or whether you buy whoever it is, because we've dealt with this. Me and you both have dealt properties where our buyers have purchased property from people that didn't have an agent, right? And we had to negotiate that, which is a skill, right? We either had to negotiate with that forcible owner to pay us that fee, or I've had situations where the client had to pay that fee, or you had to loop into the part of the offer and stuff like that. So I think that's kind of backtracking a little bit in the beginning was the two things that's actually changing in the impact are those two things of offer, compensation, and MLS, and then now buyer agency have to be signed prior to even showing your house, which again, I think that's going to be, to me, that's going to be a bigger impact of just the behavioral habits of agents, but also consumers of like, hey, I want to go see the house. Well, before we go see the house, we got to sign some things first,
Yeah, and there's going to be pushback there.
Oh, 100%.
And I think that
it's a trust factor. Like, think about that. Think if you went to go buy a car, right? You walk in a car lot. And again, I
just want to test drive the car.
I want to test drive. Sorry, before you do that, I need you to sign this contract to say that if you're going to pay us before you even, well, of course, if I buy it, I'll pay you, right? I just want to test drive the car. I understand that, but there's no guarantee that you're going to buy the car, whatever it is. I still need the contract in place to where, you're going to test drive our car and you're not going to go over to, the Ford place next door, whatever it is, and buy from them instead. Like, I need that contract in place where I can, most consumers, and again, this is probably a rational, reaction to me, but most consumers may say, fine, I'm going to go over here. But again, the new rule is now everybody's got to be equal. And I think that's going to be the biggest challenge is how many agents are actually going to follow that rule, Yeah.
And that's, well, so-and-so will do it. Well, that's okay. So-and-so can
we have that now. Yeah, we have that now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So-and-so is looking out for their best interest, not yours, right?
Yeah. And it's, I think that for me, and I'm going to be guilty as charged, and any of my clients that see this will tell you, most of my business has been referral based. I've been very blessed with that.
Yep,
and so I don't hammer paperwork down people's throat. I don't fault anybody that does.
Yep.
And I've taught it both ways. I work on a lot of implied agency.
Yeah.
I talk about it, working with real estate agents, buyer agency agreement in North Carolina. We go through it.
Yep.
But as far as getting that second piece signed, working with real estate agents up front, it's brochure, it's not really an agreement. You're supposed to get that done right away. I'm not going to pretend to even be perfect. Take me, whatever, if commissions watch it. But buyer agency agreement, it has to be, like you said, reduced to writing before you present an offer. And that is going away. It's going to be, hey, here's the compensation. Like, here's how this works. And you're asking a consumer to sign that up front. And there's really no guarantee where that money's going to come from. It's like, I'll get it. I'll get it from the seller. You don't know that.
Yeah.
You have no idea. So you get into this, okay, well, this is my minimum. This is my maximum. This is my, we've talked about this. Retainer fees will probably be a more spoken thing. Now we start talking about pre-qualifying buyers to buy houses. Are we going to start pre-qualifying buyers not just to buy houses, but hey, Mr. Lender, okay, they're pre-qualified for a $750,000 house. Okay. Are they able to pay me X?
Correct.
Is the lender even able to share that information?
Yep.
Does that become a material fact? Like, there's so many different things. And then, what's going to happen? Are they going to make adjustments to be VA buyers? I'm going down
they have to.
so many different things here, but these are the things that the news is not talking about.
Correct.
The things that can hurt the consumer also help, but like, it's not just about, oh my God, people didn't disclose or they're
Correct.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to, I think this was one of your questions. I don't think we actually spoke to it earlier. What exactly what you just said is one of the headlines was this is going to lower home prices, right? Want to make it cheaper for people to buy homes. How? Just do the math on that.
What?
How? So you tell me, do you think it's going to be, do you think home prices, I see that's the headline overall. Home prices are going to decrease. It's going to help, the home prices out of line is going to help, it's going to bring home prices down to make it more affordable for more people to buy homes. Tell me how.
If it does, it's because sellers are uneducated because they didn't hire an agent.
But here's the thing. Okay. This is when you just break down the reality. Okay. So you're trying to tell me that these same homeowners, right, that went to bat because they were upset that amount, whatever it was, was going to the agent and the buyer's agents versus staying in their pockets. Now they're going to give up that same amount to just, to not pay an agent, but they're going to lower it to the buyer can the seller's going to look out for the seller's best interest the majority of the time. Me and you both know that. Seller net sheets are a big thing. Every listing presentation, every seller I work with
should have one if you don't have one.
We look over a seller net sheet. Hey, if we were to sell to X and here's all the fees associated, here's what you're going to walk away with. How does that sound to you? Most people are going to say, yeah. Most people want the most. They want to net the most dollar. I don't see sellers all of a sudden saying, well, I'm going to not pay the agent. I'm going to say that 3%. I'm just going to lower my price down so that, the buyers can. No, they're not going to do that. Again, there's no guarantee there. I just think that analogy and the headlines that you're going around there, I'm just like, I think that is 100% absolute false, that I do not see this impacting home prices to make it more affordable for home buyers. I think if anything, it would be the reverse of that, because I think the majority of sellers are going to say, hey, instead of paying 6%, I'm only going to advertise and sell my listing, my listing agent and pay maybe 3%, 2.5%, whatever that fee is. And leave up the buyer to defend for themselves, right? So now that buyer, instead of having closing costs and down payment, now they also just added another cost, which, on top of it, which again, whatever that fee is, they just made it more expensive for that home buyer to purchase a home, not less expensive. So again, I think, our president just said it the other week is, I think his headline was exactly the same thing, is this settlement is make it more home buyers can be able to purchase homes now because of this settlement. I'm like, No, it's gonna make it a lot harder. VA buyers, you mentioned that. That's a whole rabbit hole to go down. But I think VA, the VA is going to have to redo something. And for those that don't know right now, one of the guidelines for VA loans is a veteran cannot compensate their agent. Mm-hmm. So now the decision is made is that veteran is going to go buyer beware. They're going to go unrepresented when purchasing a house. Mm-hmm. And again, there's a list of other guidelines that that we as agents know to look out for, and we're even looking at properties. That veterans are going to have to just good luck, right? But again, I think there's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to be sorted out there. I think at the end of the day, I think the VA will have to change that, because they're not going to leave the veterans going unrepresented, and they understand that.
And shame on them if they do.
And again, I don't think that would be the case. But as we stand now, that is the case. Now, and I think that was our NAR president Kevin Sears said it the other day was, we have to kind of make decision by July of this year. Will the VA make that adjustment by then? I don't think so. He thinks that maybe towards the end of the year or beginning of next year or something like that, those changes may go in effect. But again, I think when this does come down, as far as the new rules, as far as no offer compensation and stuff like that, come July, I think it's gonna be a little of a headache and a wild west there for a couple months until everybody kind of comes on the same page and say, all right, cool, here's the new guidelines or whatever that is. But I think July is a real quick change. I think when you look at contracts and you look at stuff like that, I think that's just it's going to come quick.
Yeah, it's right around the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, kind of wrapping up that consumer conversation, it really is a lot of change. It's going to be difficult for us to pin down exactly what that change is. We know the two pretty much pendings, the not going to be able to list commission in MLS anymore, and having that agency agreement that spells all of that out before we show the first door, versus whereas kind of you can work under implied agency. So we do know those things are coming. Don't necessarily disagree with those. But I think overall, to sum up what you're saying too, is there some worry there? There's some education that's going to have to happen.
Yeah.
But in theory, this should be good change for the consumer. I just don't know that they're seeing the change that we're seeing is good.
Correct.
I think they see it from a dollars and cents, where we know the dollar and cents is probably going to stay the same, if not continue to go up, because real estate has always gone up in value.
Yeah.
People are going to continue to pay more. People are going to continue to sell more. That's real estate. Land doesn't change in value. It typically goes up. I think what they need to be excited about is the people that they're going to partner with to do these transactions and to help them with these huge life investments are going to be more skilled, because the less skilled agents are not going to make it. And that's just my opinion.
Yeah. 100%.
What is the impact on the real estate agent?
Ooh. It's a slippery slope to get down.
You know what? I'm going to go ahead and anything that we say here is in no disrespect to any individual person. I know me and Bryan have had several conversations. We have a lot of respect for a lot of different ways of doing business, but I think this is a conversation that deserves the most transparent, gloves off. Just let's roll with it. Impact on the real estate agent.
You know, I'm probably not going to make many friends with this, and I've said this for years, and I think when you look at it, majority of agents are overpaid for the work they put in.
I 110% agree.
And I think the good agents understand that, and I think that's where I think that's going to be the impact of the agents is like the easy button is no longer going to be able to be pressed. You know, I think that the consumers with, you know, and again, I think we're in it every day. So how many consumers actually understand what's going on and stuff like this? But I think as time goes on, right, and as things, you know, settle even further and things like that, I think the consumers become even more educated around, all right, what actually goes into the buying and selling process, and what should I be looking for? We mentioned that in the past, so what questions should be asked. And I think many agents aren't prepared to answer those questions. I think many agents aren't. They're used to just the way of doing things, and I think that, you know, you talked about it. There's a million different ways to do real estate from a business perspective, right? Yep. From individual agents to team leaders to brokerages and things like that, of what they, you know, how they train, what they don't train on, their models, whatever you call it. And I think the ones that are, you know, the door openers to me is, you know, comes to mind and stuff like that, to where they're glorified door openers in many ways, right? They don't have the skill sets to educate consumers the way they need to be educated, to protect consumers the way they need to be protected. And I think that those are the ones that should be freaking out a little bit. And I think this is where I think the true professionals aren't really like you and I. I'm not really freaking out about this. I think, hey, to me, my value is still my value. I understand my value. I think the agents out there that don't understand and question their own value, and I saw this the other day, was like, as an agent, you really should step back and say, hey, if I had to hire myself and compensate myself, would I, right? What do I offer that consumer over the other agents that they could work with? And I think that's going to be a big question that most agents are going to have to look themselves in the mirror with and say, man, like, am I really doing the things I should be doing to get compensated the way I'm compensated?
Bro, that's the first clip of this episode. Real estate agents, if you take one thing from that nugget, look at yourself in the mirror and say, would I pay myself what I'm worth? And if the answer is no, and I think honestly, like, you know, I can be very hard on myself at times. I think a lot of the answers would be no. Yeah. But what a growth exercise, right? Yeah. When you talk about trying to get better every day, what you do being a true professional. Like, we should almost be doing that anyway if we're not.
Yeah. And again, and I think only those within the real estate industry actually understand what that means, right? The typical consumer, again, the consumer only sees what they see, right? They don't see all the behind the scenes things and the things that we have to do on a day-to-day basis to become better and to, you know, make sure we're going above and beyond and stuff like that. Marketing, accounting, you know, we got to be experts in everything you can think of: plumbing, electrical, roof, you know, all those different things that we have to kind of educate ourselves on to have some form of knowledge behind. Many agents don't take that time. Like, if they're not showing property or they're not having a conversation with a client, what are they doing, right? You both can, you know, we're not going to mention names, but we can think of many people. They're at lunch, happy hour, or, you know, such and such lender event, whatever it is, like hanging out, having some drinks and doing things like that. But like, they're not, what are they doing to kind of train, to grow, to educate themselves and stuff like that? They're not doing those things, right? Yeah. And I think those are the ones that are going to be, again, I'll say left behind, but their value is, they don't have a value right now. They don't have a value proposition to offer a client. And I think more clients are going to start asking those questions again, like, hey, what do you know, why should I hire you? You think about
that's not the sexy side of real estate, right?
No. Well, real estate's not supposed to be sexy.
Yeah.
You know, it's not. I mean,
the sexy
reality,
side
it's
of
not.
any job of getting better.
Yeah.
Like nobody, you know, you look at the reality television shows that are real estate related. I don't like selling Sunset. Okay. I'm not taking away from those
the
agents.
thing is, I've never watched one episode.
Well,
Never watched one episode.
We're dragging into last. I get forced into watch some of these. You know, happy wife, happy life. But I think for me, like, it's easy for me to look at those and be like, that's not how that's done.
Yeah,
that's not how it's done. But for those people to have gotten to that point, like Hollywood didn't just drive in and go,
yeah,
you got a good vibe, you got a good look. No, these people have created incredible businesses.
Yep.
So I would be more curious to see the not so sexy side of how did they get there? What did they do? And that's not what people see.
Yeah.
And to your point, like, are we as real estate agents continuing to sharpen that skill? And can we continue to preach that value? And I'm going to go back to it again. You look at yourself in the mirror. Am I worth what I'm asking people to pay?
Yeah.
That's a tough question.
It is. Well, and again, and I think there's no denying this, man. And I think you look at the reality of where we are today versus even when, you know, let's just rewind 5 years ago, right? Real estate agents, when you look at it from the hours we put in, you know, and things like that, the amount, do we get paid well? Yes. The good agents should get paid well because I think if the typical consumer knew exactly what we had to do day in and day out, the things we had to be knowledgeable about, the hours we had to put in. Again, I mean, how many times have me and you both been, you know, at home with our newborns or whatever it is, and you get that phone call? You know, it's hard to not answer that phone call, but, you know, you understand that, hey, this client is compensating you. Like, sometimes you have to step away and do certain things. You don't get that when you got your typical 9-to-5 job. You know, once you clock out that day, see ya. You know, you're not answering calls from that consumer saying, hey, at 8 o'clock at night. But again, just, I think when you look at it again, majority of agents, I'm going back to it, majority of agents are overpaid for the work they put in. And I think that's what hurts the industry overall. And I think that's where the consumer trust falls because they're looking at the majority, and the majority of agents are doing poor jobs of showing the value and showing what a true professional looks like. They say it, the top 1% or the top 1% for a reason. They're, you know, you look at every market's different, but, you know, the top overall transactions, 4 to 5% of those transactions are done by the top. Everything else is kind of dwindled out, you know, as far as, you know, Sue, I don't know who you are, but Sue over here is an agent for whatever it is, and she's selling 2 or 3 homes a year. Is that a business model? Yes. Some people are okay with that. But again, when you really did, and again, I may get some backlash and some hate from agents on this, but again, I look at those agents that are doing a couple of deals a year. I think those are the agents that really need to be kind of questioning that look in the mirror right now. Yeah. Because again, how am I going to stay educated? How am I going to stay on top of the know and things like that when I'm only doing, you know, one deal every 4 or 5 months? Because my mindset is, I call it commission breath. I just made, call it $4,000, $3,000 or whatever it is. And then they kind of hit the snooze button for a month or two until Andrew calls them wanting to kind of go look at a house or something. And then they hop back up and they go through the motion again, right? Yeah. It's like that, but they don't do the day-to-day grind. I don't say grind because it's not really a grind. It's the acts of the industry that actually make a professional real estate agent better.
Yeah.
Right.
And one of my mentors early on in my career, Rochelle Smart is her name. I'm going to call her out real quick. You know, this was when I was still in the builder world, and she was in the builder world at the time too, but she was a highly successful RE/MAX agent, did really well in the 2008 downturn. And she said, you know, the mentality I had to approach with every day is if I didn't have a listing appointment or I didn't have a sign in the yard, I was unemployed. And that's very true for a real estate agent.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can have a pipeline of 30 people.
Yeah.
If you don't have a transaction in line or a sign in the yard or you're working towards a closing, you're unemployed.
Yeah.
And that's a scary thought, first off. And, you know, I'm going to digress there, but it's something to think about. Like, are you worth what you're charging? And if you don't have a business in front of you right now, or you're worried about this lawsuit, like, what are you doing to change that?
Yeah.
And if you don't have an answer for that, you need to figure it out.
Yeah.
Like you need to figure it the fuck out.
And I'll say one last thing on this too, because again, kind of come back to the consumer. But most people they look at the price tag. When I say the price tag, they look at, what about agent just get compensated, right? Let's just again say the agent made $6,000 or $7,000. But you mentioned earlier is when did that transaction start? When did those first conversations really start? And yeah, you may see a $6,000 check or a $7,000 check, but how much did you get paid for the last 90 days, right? We're not paid every 2 weeks like everybody else are or whatever that is. But again, like most transactions, most conversations I'm having today with my folks, they're probably not actually going to I'm not going to get paid. If I have a conversation with you, Andrew, today, I'm going into that conversation and the reality of that, hey, I'm not getting paid for my services next week. Majority of the time, I'm kind of from a business model side of things. I'm probably, hey, my compensation from you and our conversation, and we're going to be working together for the next couple of months. Reality of the fact is it's probably 60 or 90 days out, if not beyond. From a typical
this is a 90-day cycle business.
It's a 90-day cycle,
at
right?
minimum.
And again, so you look at, yes, that agent was getting paid, but again, that was 3 months worth of work or longer, right? I mean, you talk about this is the amount of buyers you work with that I've been working with for 5 months, 6 months, 7 months. I haven't got paid a dime yet. They may not buy. They may not do nothing. They may change their mind, or they do. But again, then you start looking at it. Well, let's go back to the hourly rate. Which one do I prefer? If I'm working with that buyer that's looking for homes for 8 months and can't, and we can't find it, we can't win a deal, whatever it is. The compensation model from the way it is now, it may not be worth the 8 months I put in. But again, it's and I think that's where I just want to kind of digress on that. But I think the consumer doesn't. I think they see the number. And they see what agents are, that's a big number what they just got paid. But again, they don't see the time. It wasn't last week that we all of a sudden I had a conversation and tomorrow we're closing, There's a lot of time and a lot of conversations, a lot of back and forth and a lot of, time away from family and weekends and stuff like that, ask the typical consumer, do they want to do those things? They're going to say no. How many people balk at their everyday job when their boss asks them to stay an extra 10 minutes at work? Sorry, boss. My hours say I work 9 to 5. At 5 o'clock, I'm clocking out. I'm gone. Yeah. I'll do that tomorrow morning when I clock.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
There's not.
And we try. And the thing is like I feel bad complaining about that sometimes.
Yeah.
And we hear about it. It's like but we have a choice. We have a choice to take that call at 6 or not take that call 100%. At 6.
Yeah.
But we also know the reality of it is we're running a business where our job, if I could sum it up in a nutshell, my job as a real estate agent, outside of to be a true real estate professional, is to service my clients.
Correct.
In the way that they need me to service it. And if that's at 7 p.m. on a Saturday, do I deserve that space with my family? Absolutely. Do they deserve acknowledgement of an issue that could be very pressing to them? Absolutely. Yeah. And there's a happy median there.
Well, and I also think me and you mentioned this, it's also about how you want to do business. Me and you both, I think, are the same in many different ways as far as how we want to be, how we want to be viewed and stuff like that. Like, I don't think neither one of us are viewed by our clients hopefully I'm, foul language here, but I'm not viewed as an asshole to my clients. I want my clients to like me. I want my clients
to be a happy asshole.
Yeah, happy asshole. There we go. But I want my clients to like me and trust me to know that, hey, Bryan, yes, I may not answer that phone call at 7 o'clock, but they're going to hear from me. And it's not going to be, don't call me after at 5 o'clock. I'm with my family. It's like, hey, I'm sorry. I was away. Didn't see my phone or whatever it was. I was hanging out with my boy.
Yeah.
Again, it's just there's different models of how you can go about it. But again, as individuals, my personality type wouldn't let me be a happy asshole to those clients and not answer that phone call. Right?
Well, I think, and going back to the impact on real estate agents, it's like there's so many agents that went straight to the I do this, 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 I do this. There was a huge email or Facebook thread. Me and you have giggled about this, and guys and gals and anything, whatever, anything in between. If you posted this on your Facebook,
501 things that a real estate agent
does.
Does.
I probably know you and I still love you, but I think it was the most comical Facebook viral thing for real estate agents. I do this, I do this, I do this, I do
because
this.
It's comical because, again, I would say 90% of the people I saw post that, I'm like, you do about 5 things on that list.
Yeah.
You don't lie. Don't put out there that you're doing all those things. In reality, you're not. Most people are not doing 501 things or whatever it was on that list.
Yeah, and again, like I don't want to make fun of anybody. Everybody, it's their right to post social media. I'm sure I post some shit on social media and they're like, what a dumbass. Why would he ever put that on there? But I think that it's almost a cry for help, almost like, look at me, look what I do, justify. It goes back to what you said. All you got to do is be able to look in the mirror and go, am I worth what I charge people for my goods and services?
Yep.
And let's take that to anything like goods and services, cost of goods and services. Yes, you've heard 4%, 5%, 6%, whatever the percentage was you signed a listing agreement on. What nobody is talking about is at some point a real estate agent had to look at that and go, what is my cost of business?
Yeah.
Any successful entrepreneur, anybody that runs a business, the person that made that shirt, now we probably know that there's a huge markup on that shirt.
Yeah.
But that's fine. They still know what their cost of business is, and they know what the consumer is going to be willing to pay for that. Okay. So we know what it cost us to list a home, and it's different.
Mm-hmm.
And each home is different. And we know what it cost us roughly to go out and represent a buying client. Time. 6 months cost us more than 3 months. 12 months cost us more than 6 months.
Yep.
But we understand the cost of goods that go, So that's something that I wish more people were talking about in this lawsuit.
Yeah.
Is have you really calculated the real estate agent's time, the cost of their goods? Because I think more business people and even those folks that work a 9 to 5 would understand that more. There is a cost of business. And frankly, and this is something that they may look at that and say, we don't really give a shit what it costs you.
Yeah.
We want to buy a home. We feel like you're pretty fairly compensated with that. And obviously, it's afforded you a pretty good life. And in a lot of cases it has, but in some cases I've not known where my next paycheck was going to come from.
Yeah.
Or how I was going to put food on the table. When I first got started in real estate, I don't tell this story very often, but I didn't know where I was going to be able to buy toilet paper.
Yeah.
And that's real because I didn't know when my next check was. So I'm bouncing, do I eat food or do I buy shit wipes? And that's how I got started in real estate. And I might have told that story before, but like those are real conversations that agents have to have. So, I don't mean to poke fun at like holding your value, but the Facebook post just made me it was so cringeworthy to me. Like, look at me, I do all this stuff. Like you said, do you really do all that stuff?
Yeah.
Sometimes, but not every transaction.
Yeah.
Like, let's be real.
Well, and again, I mean, I think you look at some of the things that are on the list, and again, we won't talk too much more about the list, but you mentioned it in prior conversation was, the consumers really care that you put I had to put a lockbox on the door. Well, great. Right. Good job.
I don't give a shit.
Clap it up. But, again, I think the agents, I think as an industry as a whole, we do a very poor job at highlighting our value. Right. And again, it just comes back to what is your value proposition? What are you skilled at? Right. And I think the reality is that most agents don't have a value proposition. They're available. I think the old saying of, let's just speak about buyer's agents right now is my value proposition. If I'm a buyer's agent right now and I have a consumer looking to purchase a house and they're coming to hire me, if my value proposition is, well, I'm going to treat you like you're my only client, right? One, that's a red flag. Two, sometimes
it might be your only client.
Yeah, it might be your only client. That says a lot, right? I'm available. I'm going to answer your calls 24/7. I'm going to be available to show you houses. I'm going to do, like if it's very like just the typical, and I always say like the standards, like, well, that's expected, right? Mm-hmm. I expect you to show me houses. I expect you to, be available when I have questions and, within a timely manner, right? I expect you to be able to help me write an offer to purchase, right? That's what I'm hiring you for. Mm-hmm. Like, who are the ones that are going above and beyond, right? Who are the ones that are taking the time out of their day when they aren't with those clients to, again, do you understand the contracts? How many agents probably don't understand section, whatever it is of the contract, right? Many agents don't, right? How many people?
I still don't think there's half of our agents really understand due diligence.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. We see that all the time.
And if you're moving to North Carolina from out of state, that's the number one question I get. What is this due diligence? We don't do that shit in our state.
Yep.
But I do think that there is a large portion of our population of real estate agents that just don't truly understand. Well,
and I think that's where, we can go into different levels of depth. That's where the education and the training aspect comes in to what are you, majority of agents are part of some team or a part of some firm, brokerage, whatever it is. There's many solo agents out there, what we call it within the real estate industry, but most solo agents are either A, doing a good job at staying somewhat in the know of how to do certain things, but
Mm-hmm.
they're either on two sides of the spectrum. They're a very good, solid professional solo agent, or they're the agent that's doing 3, 4, 5 deals a year, right? And they're struggling, and they're only have their license to help their cousin or their sister, whatever it is, right?
Yep.
They're not actually practicing the business. They're not, if they're not showing houses or having a conversation, they're probably somewhere, right? They're shopping at Target or having coffee somewhere, or just not doing what they should be doing, right?
And is that who you would want representing you to buy a house? Unfortunately, I don't know.
Yeah, and again, and I think that's where the challenge comes in too. That's a tough question to answer from a consumer standpoint, because most consumers don't know what we do, and I think that's the challenge. Most consumers don't know what we do because most agents don't know what they should be doing, right? So like it's hard to say, like, how does the consumer supposed to know what a good agent does when most agents don't know what a good agent does? And I think that comes back to what I was leading into as well, is like, you look at what is the lead from the top down? What are they preaching? What are they training on? What is their focus? What are they, what are they weekly meetings and stuff like that? What are they talking about? Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you both have come across agents that's probably joined our teams and stuff like that come from other places, and basic stuff from day one. I'm like, you didn't know this, right? And like, what were they teaching you over there? They didn't ever discuss these things, and they're like, never dealt with that before. And I'm like, this is real estate 101 as far as being a professional real estate agent, things you should know. And again, I think that just goes into business strategies, but beyond, this is probably more for the real estate agent community, but teams and brokerages, and what are they offering you in value? Right?
It's a great segue.
Yeah.
Right. I think that I've always been on a team, whether I've been a buyer's agent on that team, 50-50 partner on that team, 50-50 partner at a brokerage that still has a team within. And so I've always had the word team has been associated with me. And I see a ton of value in it. And there have been many times when we've looked at that team and we've almost deviated away from who we were, which was a sphere of influence, our database. And we've tried to sprinkle in leads here and there. And then, they've never really panned out well for us, because it's just not us. We're not going to hammer the phones for 100 hours a day. It's just not how we built our business. We're not going to cold call 100 people. And not to knock that. There's been a lot of successful people.
That's a skill set.
And they will continue. That's their skill.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not my skill. And it's not my skill because I couldn't be good at it. It's not my skill because I don't want it to be my skill first. So anyway, shifting back to the teams, there are a lot of highly successful teams that I have nothing bad to say about how they run their business.
Yep.
That are, in order to support the growth, 10, 20, 50, hundreds of people that are in their team or in their organization, they've had to dump a lot of money into lead services.
Yeah.
Now, as well as I do, and the consumer may not know this, a lot of those lead services are buyer lead driven. The listings kind of come from that particular person also needing to list. But for the most part, a lot of these are people who went online, they inquired about a property, they wanted more information, that got them in somebody else's hands. Mm-hmm. And agents pay good money for that, to be that person to get into those hands. And you had mentioned something to me that I'd like for you to elaborate on. And I think this is going to be a huge industry change. That agent, that team has had to have a level of speed to that contact to have success.
Yep.
So tell me about how you think these changes will potentially affect that business model.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still some unknown there, right? Because once all these changes come into effect, how's it gonna actually play out? But I look at, you're right, speed to lead, and for those that listen, most people know what speed to lead is. Speaking of some of those portal sites and things like that you mentioned too, business models where they pay large fees to be the first person that, when that person inquires about a property, normally there's a slew of agents that might have the ability to kind of contact that person, right? And it's speed to lead is who, normally is the first person to contact normally wins, right? Mm-hmm. So whenever you are as a consumer and you inquire about that property, you're not normally just going to that one individual. Most people are probably getting 2-3 different agents reaching out to them saying, hey, I saw you just inquired about that property, whatever it is. It's normally speed to lead, right? But with the changes coming within real estate industry now, where it's the first speed the lead was like, hey, I want to go see 123 Main Street. Who's the first person to go see it? Well, now with these new rule changes, it's not necessarily the case no more. Now it's, hey, well, before we go show you 123 Main Street, I got to sit down with you now. I got to educate you about the process, and I got to talk about an agreement and how we're compensated and what goes into the buying process and a buyer consultation, all the different things, right? So again, it's not only just speed to lead, and I think that's where the importance of the skill set comes in. Like, hey, if you're meeting in front of a person, are you skilled enough to actually educate that individual about the buying process, right? I won't say most. I think there's a majority of agents that are probably going to struggle with that because they're not. They're used to, they're taught and they're trained in their model that they're underneath right now is probably, hey, go show them the house. I'll say worry about the rest later, but that's the fact. I feel like that's the case sometimes. Show them the house. If they like it, then we'll go beyond the next steps. But again, like I think when you got to sit down with an individual before you even show them, and you got to educate them and get them to be able to have to sign an agreement with you about exclusively working with you as a buyer representation, that is a different skill set where I think the speed to lead, it's important in a different way. It's not speed to lead the first person to show them a house, answer the phone. It's speed to lead to the first person actually able to sit down with them and educate that person around that. Mm-hmm. But the people, just because you sit down with somebody, if you're not skilled enough to educate them around, hey, here's what I offer. When you work with me as a buyer representation, I'm not just going to open doors for you. I'm not just going to kind of send you a contract for you to sign. Here's the things I'm going to do to help make sure you're successful as far as buying, selling a home. We deal with multiple offers. Great. What do you do in a multiple offer situation? I've talked about this too. Is
all he does is win.
Yeah. I'll talk about this too. Is from a buyer perspective. Like one of the questions if I was a consumer buying a house today is, with multiple offers being a very common thing still within the industry is, hey, what is your buyer, what is your likelihood of winning a multiple offer situation with your clients? If your clients go up in multiple offer situations, are you losing them or are you winning them? I want to work with the agents that are able to have different strategies and advice to me to make sure that I'm putting myself in the best position to win that offer. I don't want to go show 100. Most consumers don't want to go look at a lot of houses, make offers and lose and then have to do it all over again. Most consumers want to be, hey, here's what I'm looking for. I want to help you to help me find that, that type of property. Once we find it, I want you to help me kind of walk me through the process of what it's going to take to draft a good competitive offer that's going to help me win that offer. Because once I find that house, I want that house. If you don't have a strategy behind how you're going to help me win that multiple offer, and you don't have that, you're not able to kind of showcase that to me, am I going to sign that piece of paper hiring you as my agent? Probably not, right? No. And I think that's where some of the industry is changing because, again, the protection from the MLS compensation side of things in many ways was like, hey, if I'm representing you as a buyer, if we're looking on the MLS or I find a house, normally I don't have to have the, it's there. It's known we're going to be compensated, right? You're kind of, there's like a protection, I should say, as far as things. But again, I think just the speed to lead concept is going to go away where it's not just the first person to show them a house and go from there. I think it's going to be the first person to kind of sit down with them and be able to educate that person. But again, I think from the consumer side of things, the lieu of questions that they're probably going to be asking, and I think agents need to be prepared for, are going to change drastically. I think as time goes on, I think in the beginning, I think it's going to be kind of the normal, like, hey, well, I just want to see 123 Main Street, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Most consumers may not know that. Well, before we go see 123 Main Street, here the things kind of happen first. But as time goes on and that becomes more of the normal, I think consumers are going to say, well, again, before I sign on that dotted line to hire you as the individual that represents me during this massive transaction that I'm about to, partake in, I want to make sure that I'm hiring the right person. You don't just go, and I think there's always going to be consumers that just go with whoever it is because they know the person, right? And I always come back to other professionals of like, those are probably still the same people that's, on Facebook protesting because they're paying too much in taxes, but they use TurboTax and did it themselves, right? Like if you use a true professional, there might be ways to save money, right?
Yeah,
things like that to where
I don't want to pay a true professional; they cost too much money.
Exactly, let's pay her. Exactly. My accountant cost me an extra $500, but he saved me $5,000.
We could do all right. We could do the same thing with attorneys. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to use something that's fairly common to most. Knock on wood. Never been there. DUIs, right? You can hire a crappy DUI attorney. Now, should you yeah, chances are you were a dumbass and you deserve whatever you got for making that decision. But I'm just going to use it as a reference. You hire an attorney that costs $1,000, you're probably paying out $50,000. You hire an attorney that costs $10,000, you're probably paying out $10,000.
Yep.
So you get what you pay for in these professional services. Not to condone drinking and driving. I'm just saying that who you hire matters when you're looking at your financial capabilities in these transactions.
You should get Uber to sponsor this podcast.
Uber. I'm working. Last time we went for Andre, didn't hear from him. I think what Buffalo Trace is over here today. It's unopened, but
because we got to drive after this.
Exactly. We don't condone that. We are having tomato juice with celery sticks. We're being healthy this morning. But I love that you say that. And again, I don't want to scare people that are on teams that are hugely internet lead driven.
Yeah.
But I do worry about them because their business model to this point has been answer the phone. Yes, I'm available. What do you want to go see? You want to see it at 4.
Yep.
I'll see you at 4. 1, highly unsafe, especially for our female agents.
Correct.
But 2, you can't, I'm not going to say can't because we don't know what's come out yet.
Correct.
In theory,
that's going to
come June, July, whenever this settles, that business practice is going to go away legally.
Correct. And I'll say this too, and I think there's many good business owners, team leaders, firm leaders, and things like that. They should dissect this as well and change. Right? They're probably going to have to shift things and things. I think this is again, it comes back to agents just as consumers are probably questioning their agent. I think agents should be, I won't say questioning their leadership, but they should be asking, if your leader's not kind of talking about this thing, and we keep hearing that, if your leadership's not having some form of take as far as hey, this is what's happening, here's how we're going to prepare for it. Mm-hmm. I think that's a sign of your leadership just being, I don't say a true leader, but I think there's change coming. There's no denying that. And I think a good leader needs to make sure that they're prepared for that, to make sure that, hey, if I'm really looking out for the best interests of my agents and the people that's below me, I need to make sure that I'm educating myself on this as well, just so that they're not caught, blind in the act once these changes go into effect that, well, hey, I'm looking to you as my leader. What am I supposed to do? You should be getting ahead of the game on that, right? And if your leader's not, and there's just the, business as usual type things, I think that's the one where the agents probably should be questioning, hey, is this where I need to be, or how's that going to look like?
Yeah. How am I going to wake up in the morning and preach my value?
Yeah.
And keep going back. I love that comment you made about the mirror. What am I going to do? And are the people around me supporting that?
Yeah.
So any other just huge real estate agent changes, implications, huge impact that you feel like this lawsuit's going to bring that we haven't talked about?
I don't say. So again, I think there's a lot to still be uncovered, right? But I've heard a lot of talk, and me and you've had conversations. I've had conversations with other, local people, non-local people, leaders within the real estate industry and stuff like that. And I think you start looking at, I think you mentioned it earlier, you go into a restaurant, you look at a menu, what's my, what do I have to offer? I could potentially see things like that, meaning hey, here's my 3 packages, right? Consumers able to choose. I could, I've heard some talks about that. And what I mean by that is, if I'm a consumer and I sit down with an agent versus it being your standard, hey, this is my fee, this is what I charge. It could be, hey, for this fee or this charge, here's what I provide. Here's the services I provide. Just as, many listing agents do now, but from a buyer side, hey, to get this level of service and to get, X, Y, and Z, whatever it is, here's this fee to go a little bit level up to be, give you reassurance and maybe some other things that I throw into the deal. Here's my fee for that, whatever it is. And I think this is going to be the biggest change. And again, I don't think consumers will see this as much, but I think real estate agents should be aware of this. I saw this as well, and I couldn't agree more, I think a typical seller normally interviews a couple agents before they hire who's going to list their house. Mm-hmm. I think that's going to I think the percentage of that's going to go up quite significant as far as when it comes to buyers agents. I think we're going to see more buyers saying, hey, before I hire you, Andrew, I'll have a meeting with Bryan tomorrow as well. I want to kind of see what he offers and what his results are as far as getting his buyers, under contract and close and stuff like that. Right.
Yeah.
I think the interview process from hiring an agent from both sides of the party is going to be a lot more equal. I think NAR, going back to the stats where it's like this last year, I think it was, I may be wrong, but I think it was 76% of the buyers went with the first agent they met with. I think that'll come down. Right. I think it could come down where I think more agents are going to say, hey, before I go, because again, if I'm left with paying you that fee, just as sellers do, they want to make sure that it's worth it, right? Are you going to be available to show me houses on weekends? Because here's where my work schedule. Are you going to be available for this? Are you going to educate me on this? Again, if I'm going up against multiple offers, what are you going to be able to do in that situation? How can you show me results behind what you've done for other clients to help them win offers? Like things like that, again, consumers are probably going to be asking those questions. I think buyers are going to have to be a little bit more prepared to interview for the job of being your buyer's buyer's agent and so forth, just as most listing agents do now. I think it's, most people think that it's just everybody lists with, hey, I list with Andrew because I know him. That's the case in many times, but again, we still have to say we interview for those jobs. Mm-hmm. But in many cases, the buyer they're not used to that as much. Buyer's agents aren't used to that as much. But again, I think that's probably be the biggest change that I'm preparing for, that I've told my folks to kind of be prepared for, is I think from a buyer perspective, be prepared for being a little bit, going through a buyer presentation to interview for that job and to be hired as their buyer rep before you assume the business.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad you say that. And this is going to be a really tough shift for me, because going into buyer conversations, I typically have assumed the business.
Yeah.
Just because the way it's been set up.
Transparently, I have as well. I mean, because again, I think me and you are both, as far as you look at where our business comes from, again, there's different areas of business and how you attract business. I'm the same as you, man. Like a lot of my business has been, sphere of influence database, right? It's those people that know, like, and trust me already. I'm not having to kind of I'm not finding many online leads and stuff like that. Like, I do those things, but majority of my business is just as you. And the funny thing I think both me and you both need to talk about as well is I saw something the other day and it said, you thought working with a family member was tough before, but now imagine having to let them know that, hey, now they really have to pay you a little bit more to show them all those houses as well.
It's crazy. And I think that we as an industry, we find, and the lending professionals too, not going to call anybody out, we find a way as a group to overcome adversity. When rates got high, we found a way to talk about it in a positive light. And when rates were low, I mean, what was every buyer agent in the world talking? Rates have never been lower.
Historic lows, yeah.
My representation that was my favorite one. You can hire, it doesn't cost you any money to have representation.
Yep.
You can't market that anymore.
Which is a big reason these things came.
Yeah.
The settlement is what it is.
And the thing is, it's like, I don't fault them for saying it, because one, they were learning it from somebody. They were seeing it from somebody, and it came from somewhere. And it came from the reality that most listing agreements, the firms were offering buyer compensation, which does come from the seller. However you want to chalk that up. Or you could say it comes from the buyer's loan. So the buyer may really be paying it because they're the one financing it. And that's where, anyway, it's coming out of the proceed lines of the seller side of the CD or HUD, whatever you want to call it. And you can't, if that's how you built your business, and there are some that did, you can no longer go on Facebook and be like, hey, my services are free. What were your free services to begin with? Do you even know what they were? And I'm going to be honest with you, like, I've been sitting here thinking since you posed that question, if I had to answer that, honestly, what would I say? And I don't think we talk about this enough. You know, I've had friends call me from other states. I'm not going to say names, but I do remember an example of a friend that lives out in California. They were interviewing agents to help them buy a home. It's been 2 years ago, probably. So they were interviewing agents. And what should I be looking for in an agent? It's so easy to have that conversation. Well, they need to be competent. They need to be this. They need to be. They need to understand this. It's a competitive market. They need to know what to do here. They need to be full time. They need to be all this stuff. And my favorite thing to add in that list is, and this, you know, you got to vibe with that person.
Yeah.
You're going to be in the trenches with this person for a while, talking about stuff that's difficult. And if you just don't get along with that person, you're probably not going to have a good transaction. It should be a good transaction. Now, you may say, hey, in some cases, I don't want to vibe with them because I want to keep it completely professional. I don't ever, and as agents, there are some agents that are transactional agents versus database agents. So they see things as a transaction. They have all their friends. They don't need any more friends. I don't hate them for that either. That's, I was
about to say, because transparently, those in many instances where the consumer is interviewing the agent, I promise you, I'm also interviewing the consumer, right? Because if I get that vibe up front, like, hey, I don't have to work with you. I'm not a commission breath agent. I'm not gonna, I'm not fighting for that commission. If I don't have that vibe, like you mentioned as well, I'm probably not the best agent for you. I'm gonna go focus on people that I want to work with as well, and I want to represent because I care about them. If you're giving me that vibe as a consumer, that man, you ain't somebody I don't vibe with you and I don't want to work with you, I promise you, I'm probably gonna say, hey, I think you should call Andrew. Andrew might be a better agent or whatever it is, right? So
he'll show you shit at 9 p.m. at night all day long. Yeah, I've seen him carry his son with him. He'll bring him on the show and wake him up out of bed, change his diaper. Anyway,
hey, whatever it takes.
I love that you shifted to that because we haven't really talked about that side of this, having to have all the paperwork lined up right up front. And, again, I know some people do that already, but it's not a law.
Yeah.
It's a law before you submit an offer, not a law before you show houses. So with that being the law, to be repetitive there, now you're interviewing me as an agent. I'm talking about my value. If I don't know you that well or at all, I'm also seeing how you treat somebody in this industry.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing how you value me in the transaction. And yes, it is up to me to present as much value to you because that's how I feed my family.
Yep.
And I do enjoy and love what I do and see the value in it. But at the same time, like, if I've got 30 buyers in my pipeline right now, that may get, in this whole ordeal, realistically, that could be reduced in half or maybe even in thirds. I may get cut back to only 10 buyers.
Yep.
But I can tell you right now, those are 10 buyers that want to work with me.
Yep.
Those are 10 buyers that believe in my value, believe in what I add, believe in helping me feed my family through my business, and know that I'm going to have their best interests at heart.
Correct.
I would rather have those 10 people over the 30
100%.
all day long.
Yep.
So there's so many different ways to look at this. And I think as agents, we've got to stop seeing it as the consumer is against me. I have to preach value. And I still hear this and read this on every message thread. How did this lawsuit ever win?
Yeah.
And we can talk about in AR's response. We'll segue into that. How did this lawsuit ever win? It's simple. This lawsuit won because we did a shitty job for too long.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that's my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
We did a shitty job.
It goes back to, again, I mean, I think from the whole, if you were to kind of step back and take a bird's eye view, again, it goes back to majority of agents don't know they don't know their value. They don't know what they should know and they shouldn't know as well as that. So the consumer just knows what their last agent probably showed them, right? Mm-hmm. If majority of agents are doing a very poor job of showing that proposition and not really educating and putting their clients through, I don't say bad situations, but bad situations, that consumer most likely probably is going to have a poor taste in their mouth as far as what a real estate agent does, right? And again, I think that's the reality. I think a lot of consumers, they get their perception of their thoughts of what a real estate agent is and how they feel about them based on their last agent they hired, right? Mm-hmm. And again, I think that's where if you're hiring agents just based off, well, I went to high school with them, we're friends on Facebook or whatever it is, but you're not asking those direct questions going forward as far as like, hey, can you show me your experience level in this situation? Can you show me how you're going to handle, negotiate me through the deal to make sure I'm getting through things like that. Like if you're not asking those, well, then you're probably going to end up with the agent that, probably does a poor job, not be able to show that experience.
Yeah.
And again, I just think that's, as an industry, you're right. I think, we're right up there. What they say, we're right below used car salesmen, whatever it is, as far as the lease.
Yeah, we're right down there with them, bro.
And again, I think it comes back to where, like, I agree. I 100% agree with that. I always tell people, man, it's like I deal with way more agents than the consumer deals with. you know, and I love many agents out there. I have a lot of relationships with a lot of agents around here, a lot of local agents, but I also feel for a lot of agents that are going through this time of no different when you mentioned it, going back to COVID, the amount of agents that I saw literally freak out because their way of doing things changed. I'm like, dude, I've been in real estate since 2016. I know you've been there about
13, 14. Yeah. Right about the same time.
Dude, every year, every 2 years, I look at the changes I've just had since 2016, you know, through interest rates, through COVID, through home prices, through lending, through now the agency commissions. Like, real estate is ever evolving, right? The way of doing business is ever evolving. If you're not prepared for that, if you just expect, if you're a real estate agent and you expect it to be this day, how it is today, forever throughout your, your career, you're in for rude awakening. Because I'm like, just in the 8 or 9 years I've been in it, so much has changed. And just as I'm preparing now to change for this, I always know that, hey, 2025 or 2030, whatever it is, there's going to be more changes then. Like, this isn't concrete. It's going to be this way forever, because odds are it's going to change again. It's just adjusting to that change as a business owner's mindset to be prepared for it.
Nice. Well, let's push past that a little bit, and let's talk about the NAR, who we NAR, not NRA.
You got to write this
National Association of Realtors. Now, for those that don't know, kind of how we're set up is we have a local board, we have state boards, we have national boards. We pay local dues, state dues, national dues. So as real estate agents, many states have different laws. You can be salespeople, brokers, BICs, whatever you want to be. So in North Carolina, we are a broker state. You get a license, you are a real estate broker. You come in as a provisional broker, take some additional courses, you become a broker. You want to be a BIC, you have some additional requirements around that, yada, yada, blah, 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 all that good stuff. Okay, so that does not necessarily make you a realtor. Not realtor, not realtor, realtor. That's how it's spelled. But you can say it however you want. So we pay our local board. There are many around here. Mine happens to be GRRA, Greensboro Regional Realtor Associations. And then we have High Point, Winston, Alamance, and so on and so on. And through that, we get MLS. And then we also are realtors with NAR, right? So we pay dues to have that. And this is a hugely profitable company that represents us as real estate agents in our interest, supposedly. And, there's been many times in the past, we talk about realtor.com, we talk about other things where people feel like they've kind of sold us out, Zillow syndications and all this good stuff. And so I'm curious what your take is on how the NAR helped, hindered, or just what was their stance on this lawsuit and what could they have done better or did well?
Yeah, I mean, dude, I'll be 100% honest, transparently. I feel like this is 100% just opinion based, and from the research that I put in myself on this is, in many ways, I think the settlement, I've heard a lot of headlines and a lot of posts from other real agents that NAR sold us out. They should have never settled. They didn't fight hard enough for us. I think if you really looked back on it, there's two things. One, this probably could have been prevented years ago, right? If they, supposedly, and again, I haven't dove deeply enough into this, but supposedly, like when this first came up, one of the things that they want to change was the compensation side of things. So in the beginning, a lot of opinions are, if NAR would have just said in the beginning, hey, you know what? Fine. We will remove the, requirement for compensation away from MLS, right? And what I mean by that is the requirement is, you could just put $1 as far as the compensation in the past, but you're offering compensation. There's never no set fee of what you had to offer this minimum. It could be a penny. You had to offer compensation up until I think it was November of this last year was when they changed it, where now you could put 0% because of all the things going on. They could see that, right? Mm-hmm. And there's been individuals that said that, hey man, if NAR would have just stated that in the beginning, we probably would have just been perfectly fine, because that was the whole uproar. It was like, hey, we're requiring, and some people think that they're, we're, antitrust and price fixing in MLS we're putting, and the consumer can't see that. We're saying, hey, you have to pay this, whatever it is. It's not the case. But the second part is I feel like the NAR didn't have a choice once it got to where it got to. Once the DOJ got involved, and everybody knows that, like, once it got to that, what the DOJ says goes. And I think when you look at the alternatives, like we talked about as far as what the DOJ proposed, I think the NAR started seeing the writing on the wall. It's like, look, look, let's go ahead and bow out now. Let's go ahead and settle. We'll make the changes. We probably should have. We agree on some things. We probably should have made these changes in the past. Yes, but we don't agree with them. But I think when you look at the whole, NAR settlement, I think they almost got out as a discount of what they were facing. I mean, they got out for what is it, $418 million, and I think for supposedly it was, if they probably could have went through, but look, Kevin Sears, NAR president, said this last week was, they were looking at a couple different options. They could continue fighting against it and allowing more and more and more and more copycat cases come into case, which only builds the funds up, and opens up more, avenues and more lawsuits. And the other one was going up against, I think it was like a $5-point-something billion settlement that they would have had to place a bond on, which ultimately, from a accounting perspective, they say would have bankrupted NAR, and then then we don't have that, the things that come with being an NAR member, right? Yeah. So I just look at it. I mean, I think again, it's just some opinion from the little things I put into it. Is I think NAR didn't have a choice. Well, I say they did have a choice. From what I do agree that some of these changes probably should have been put in place a long time ago. I feel like they were back, putting kind of back into a corner a little bit as far as their options when it came down to this. But ultimately, too, I think, too, is when you look at, and this is what most consumers don't realize as well, as we've spoke about this many times, is real estate is such a state-by-state, when it comes to like how things are done. Every state's different, right? I think, personally, the way that North Carolina, as much as we agree and we don't agree, North Carolina is one of the strictest real estate law states there are. I think that's where the NAR should have stepped up in the past and said, hey, like, these are things that should be put in place. And I think North Carolina should have been a good example. And there's other states that kind of follow some of the North Carolina rules as well. I think that should have been, I think that should have been the case across the board. I think more, the way North Carolina does as far as the, again, most consumers don't know this, but, within our listing agreements, you mentioned it, hey, here's our compensation, but there's in there, it's clear as day, it's a whole paragraph about that we're agreeing to compensate a buyer agent, a buyer's agent who brings a buyer, right? And you don't have to put anything there. You don't have to. You can there's 3 options, right?
Yeah.
Other states do not have that. And I think that's where this whole thing evolved from, was that like, hey, they didn't know that they were having to pay, the buyer's agent was being compensated and stuff like that, right? Whether that's how that conversation went with their agent and so forth as well. But again, I think that's some of the things, in my personal opinion, is I think real estate contracts and addendums and laws and things like that, national level wise, should be a little bit more strict versus leaving it up to the states to decide how they want to do things. And again, I think from my personal opinion, I think North Carolina has done a very good job of saying, hey, we're gonna make it tough. We're gonna be ahead of the game on some things. We're gonna be, it's more of a headache. We're stricter laws from how other states are, but here's why. And I think now we're starting to see that here's why they do North Carolina does things the way they do, because now other states are they didn't follow suit, and here we are now.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned. Love a lot of things you just said there. I'm gonna go back to the DOJ.
Yep.
At one point there was a thought in my head. It's like, okay, what exactly is the NAR fighting for at this point?
Yeah.
A lot of big brokerages that were named in the lawsuit had settled. So yeah.
Got it.
Brian has broken his mic, so we're just gonna.
I got it.
I'm gonna keep going. Little technical difficulty over here. He said DOJ and he got mad, just broke his mic. So I love that you mentioned the DOJ, because they were coming into this conversation.
Yeah.
And they were ready to shut it down. It was, and you know what? If I'm wrong in saying this, if I'm misinformed, I am. But my understanding was the DOJ was going to come in and just make it illegal for sellers to pay any type of compensation to buyer.
Correct.
And I think they should have the option.
Yep.
And so if anything,
which they still do, and I think that's a big misperception as well.
They will still have the option.
Thank you.
Now, it cannot be put in MLS.
Correct.
Or third party. No agent notes. No encrypted into the real. It cannot be anywhere in there.
Yep.
It's an entirely negotiable number, but they still are able to pay a agreed upon fee to a buyer brokerage, who will then pay the buyer's agent to represent the buyer in the transaction.
Yep.
So I think by them settling and the DOJ not making that decision was a huge win for our industry. And I think it's an even bigger win for the consumer, because I think as this progresses and things change and business plans change, I'm going to go back to this, and we started early in our conversation about this. It is still my true belief that the best way to sell a residential piece of property is to have a strong listing agent represent a seller, offer fair compensation to have a strong buyer represented a buyer's agent, bring a buyer that is ready, willing, that has done the work, that has done the things they know to do to get a buyer ready to buy your home and represent them. I don't know of a better way of doing business where all parties win in the way that they should win.
Correct.
Okay. And in that, no, back to your question you asked originally, I don't think home prices are going to come down.
Yep.
I don't think this is going to save people any extra money.
Yep.
I think it's going to sharpen real estate agents. And I think the people that don't have the skills are going to get put out of business. And back to the NAR, look, love them, hate them. I'm not saying I'm big fans of them, but I think the settlement, I think they kind of had to do it.
Yeah.
And it would be easy to pick them apart. But I'll take this over the DOJ making laws that we can't control.
Yeah, 100%.
That could have just, imagine a world where the sellers just couldn't even pay it legally.
Yeah.
Imagine the predatory business practices that would come in and prey on these buyers, figure out a way to get money from them, to represent them in a transaction.
Yep.
And the people that would be hurt are the lower income, middle class buyers that just want a freaking house to live in.
Yep.
They already have enough to compete with.
Yep.
And I think that the sooner we get past this and we get the professionals like yourself in line, figuring out what this is going to bring and how it's going to change the business. Some of our weaker real estate friends, and I don't feel bad in saying that, every job has the 1%. And I think, the 80-20 rule used to be in real estate. I think it's close to 95-5 now across the board. And I think it will only continue to go.
Yeah.
And sorry, I'm getting a little passionate about this, but I think that this lawsuit ends up being a good thing.
Yeah.
In a nutshell. And I hate, $418 million, shit ton of money. And somehow I feel like we're going to end up paying for that because, here's the email next year. Hey, everybody, dues are going up 25% across the board. And 100%. Do I think they need competition? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't think we should have to be bound to be a part of their organization.
Yep.
But currently we kind of do to have the MLS.
Yep.
I think we should have statewide MLS.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind a national MLS.
Well, you about to get all kinds of backlash on this.
Dude, all day long. Look, man, I'm about to grow to Virginia. If y'all didn't know it, we're going to be in Danville, Virginia. And I would love to be able to have my agents that live within an hour and 45 minutes of 3 different areas from Danville, Rockingham County down into Greensboro, all the way over to Mebane and Triangle that can actually sell in that and be a professional. Now, I'm going to go to this in a second. I understand. Well, that's not your area. Well, if you're good enough, you can be a professional in that area.
Yep.
I shouldn't have to pay 3 different MLSs and 2 different state boards. Well, I get the state board, different rules, different laws in state level. But anyway, at least state level MLS. But national, I am going to get some backlash on that, right?
Yep.
But here's the thing, though. I meant to mention this earlier. We start talking about professionals and knowledge. My mom owns a beach condo, and she wants to sell it. It's in Ocean Isle Beach. If anybody wants to buy a condo in Ocean Isle Beach, plug on that. I could easily sell that. I do this every day. I could figure out a way to put it up. The internet's there. Technology's there. I know how to I already got photos. It was a rental. I've got all this stuff I need. And I sat there and I'm like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
It wasn't, the compensation never came into my mind.
100%.
It wasn't, I don't want to pay somebody 5% to do that, or 6%, or whatever the negotiated fee is to sell that property. It was time.
Yep.
I don't know that market. I'm not a professional in that market.
Yep.
Okay. I don't know the beach. I don't know how the insurances work on the properties. Exactly. I don't know about this condo association. It's just different.
Yep.
I don't know about the beach. And then 2, what is my time worth?
Yeah.
And so I'm leveraging this huge investment for my mom that I could easily have done myself and been like, oh, I can save her this money. I might not have.
Correct.
Because I'm not the professional down there. I might have cost her money.
Yep.
And not only would I would have cost her potential money, I would have cost myself time, which would have potentially cost my family money.
Yep.
So I think where I'm rambling on and going with is it's not all about the commission for the buyer, or it's what the value you're bringing. And anyway,
and I think that's I'll just talking about it. I think that's a tough thing to put a value on, right? Because it's like, how do you value that, right? And I think that's the thing where like I think good professionals like yourself, like you just said that as well, is like not even I never once gone to a transaction and going, well, I'm gonna make X on this, whatever it is. Like I don't think about that. I'm thinking about all the other things that I need to be prepared and what do I need to look out for? What are the, what's the process? Whatever those things are, right? But I don't think there's a value on putting beyond, or a value you can put on how much you just saved your mom, right? Because again, yes, you could have done those things, but there's a numerous of things that could have come up that you didn't know. There could have been, a town hall meeting down there you didn't know about, right? And you didn't get the newsletter, what it was, because you weren't in the local board down there. Things like that you probably should have known, or the streets widening. That yes, once that transaction closes, or you didn't know to disclose whatever it is, could have come back where a homeowner or the future buyer sues her or stuff like that. Again, like all those different things where it's just like the unknown that you can't put a dollar sign behind, that you helped ultimately save her on because you weren't worried about putting money in your pocket.
Exactly.
Right.
And I can also tell you a couple of things that I didn't do in that. My uncle happens to be a real estate agent down there, very, very well versed. And he's kind of out of the Wilmington market. So I don't even know if Ocean Isle is his specialty. If it is, obviously I want to work with my uncle. I didn't ask him to reduce anything that he typically charges for his cost of business. If it wasn't going to be him, which we're still in this conversation, I'm not going to ask him for the cheapest agent. I do want to know, because if somebody's going to write 7% on there, I might be like, I don't want to pay 7%. You know what I mean? But I want to know who's the most well-versed agent.
Correct. The best
that can get this job.
Best agent for the job.
Who's the best agent?
Yep.
And it's not just about feeding my family, my uncle, who I love. And if he's the best agent, that's who I want to hire at what he sees himself as worth.
Yep.
And so, and that is a real estate agent, practicing real estate agent as the consumer saying these things.
Yeah.
And it's not because I'm trying to I'll show the proof when it's all said and done.
Yep.
That's the way that I believe this transaction should be done, because I see it day in and day out. And that's how I know it's two things. I'm trying to achieve two things for my mom. I want to net her the most amount of money with the least amount of stress.
Yeah. And you look at most home sellers, that's what they're looking for.
That's what they're looking for.
Yep.
Day in and day out.
Yep.
Ask Thomas, is taping over here. Thomas, if you were going to sell your house tomorrow, would you have, obviously you'd have some other goals and whatnot, but would netting the most money for your investment with the least amount of stress not be at least two of the things near the top of the list?
1,000%.
1,000%.
Yes.
And that's, dude, you've asked this question. I'm going to listen to an appointment this afternoon. One of the first questions I'm going to ask, what's important to you?
100%. Yep. Yep.
And it's always going to come up. You're going to hear the honesty, transparency, skill set. How many houses have you sold? But ultimately, the seller wants to make the most amount of money, the least amount of stress.
Yep.
And I will argue that all day long. And I'm sorry, consumer. I'm sorry, lawsuit. All that aside, God, man, I really got on a soapbox over here the last 10 minutes. All that aside, show me a better way.
Yeah.
And I will, by all means, sit down, analyze it, and get better myself.
Yeah.
Not to say that I don't try to do that every day, and I know you do as well. You're very learning based. But anyway.
I think ultimately we can agree on this to end with, right? The whole thing is a good thing for the consumers, but also for the industry of real estate agents, right? Because I think we both mentioned that it's going to force agents to become better, which I'm all for. I mean, I've invested so much in coaching and education to where I'm not doing that I'm doing that because I want to get better, right? I want to be able to know that I'm in depth as far as within what I need to know, right? But then two, I think from the DOJ and from the whole settlement cases, transparency in business is always a good thing. I think going forward, I think there's going to be transparency I think there's always been confusion between, who does pay the agents and who, I think even agents do a poor job of educating that. So there's been.
Can I interrupt you and you still hold your thought, or do you need to
keep you're
going?
good.
Okay. I always thought I did a good job at that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I was having this conversation with you, but I was with some buddies recently. 6 or 7 of us. I've done business, personal business with most of the table, maybe one or two, but obviously we've all been in the same conversation. And this came up because they were concerned. They were like, hey, how do you feel like this is going to affect your business? They were being good friends, and I love them for that. And I told them about, you know, this and this and this. And I just asked them the question, like, do you guys really feel like you understood that commission was negotiable? I expected them all to be like, of course. You explain that to us. Because I've got a spiel. I'm not going to do my whole script here, but it is scripted and is very repetitive. And I do that for a reason. Every single one of them, and this was not the I'm going to elbow you, jab you, mess with you.
Yep.
Every single one of them said, honestly, Andrew, we did not truly understand that commissions were negotiable. We knew that we could probably hire somebody else that may do it for more or less.
Yeah.
But, you know, we were going to hire you, and we always were for a lot of different reasons. But we did not truly understand that it's negotiable. That was eye-opening for me.
Yeah. Which again, and I think that's where you can have 1,000 different opinions on it, because I hate the word in that scenario is negotiable, right? Because again, I look at this, I'm going to, and again, we talk about some of these agents, but when I say negotiable, that means that I go into the table of anything that I purchase, right, as a consumer, that I need to go up to that individual, that business owner, whatever it is, you know, I'm going to use today's example, right? Do we negotiate the fee for having this set up in this space and everything like that? No, right? It's not negotiable. Most people have a fee for what they provide. My service is X. Here's my fee. So when I say the word negotiable, is it negotiable in some ways per the contract? Yes. But I challenge that I don't necessarily agree that I don't agree that what I feel like my services and what I provide as my value should be negotiable, because if I'm going to state my fee, and if this is my fee to work with you and for you to hire me, blah, blah, blah. If you don't want to pay that, we're probably going to have a conversation around that. But if we're not kind of coming to some understanding that, hey, this is my fee and this is why I stand behind my fee. Again, coming back to where I'm probably not the best agent. If you're looking for that cheaper agent that's not going to provide the value I provide, well, then I'm probably going to educate you to go work with that agent.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily going to negotiate my fee as much as some people may, right? The negotiation part comes into probably what you're going to as far as North Carolina is the total commission. How much do we need to negotiate what we're willing to offer the buyer's agent compensation and stuff like that. I think that's where people get the confusion between, is your fee negotiable? Is it not? Yes and no, right? And I think that's where I think transparency will be a good thing in this whole situation, because they're going to know, hey, the listing agent their fee is this. And as a consumer, the buyer's agent can be, we're agreeing, being transparent, that we're going to offer a compensation, yes or no. And if we are, here's what it's going to be. I think in the past, that's where probably like your friends are probably saying, like, we didn't know we can negotiate with you on what we're going to offer the buyer's agent compensation. Yeah. And I think from my side of the fee, as far as my listing services or buyer services, whatever it is, I think that's where the negotiation part is. Like, it's there. Yes, it needs to be there, but it's saying, like, why us as real estate agents, are we the only ones that's, I'll say, being required to negotiate our fee? Like, you don't walk into I don't walk into my mechanic and say, hey, I need to get my tires rotated, and they have their sign posted, it's, $100, whatever it is. I don't sit down there and say, well, can you do it for 70? Like, I don't expect them to negotiate their fee, right? Now, things like that. So again, that's just a rabbit hole that I could get down to. Like, that's just my 2 cents. Again, I may be wrong in saying that, but again, I think that's where the negotiation part to me is, like, I don't say confusing, but it can be like, I agree and I disagree with the whole, is it negotiable?
Yeah. Well, is it negotiable? Yes. Do you have to agree to the negotiation? No.
100%.
Consumer doesn't have to agree to it.
Yep.
You as the real estate agent doesn't have to agree to it. The consumer should understand that it is a negotiable number.
Yep.
Just like anything is. I can walk into Apple and buy this laptop, and it's listed at $999.
Yep.
I'm pretty much assuming that they're not going to negotiate that.
Yep.
Could I walk in and be like, I'll tell you what, I got cash. I'm going to give you cash.
Yep.
$899 right now, cash. Apple's going to go kiss my ass.
Yeah.
Like, we know what value we provide.
Yeah, go to Dell
that
next door.
computer's worth $999. And 100 people behind you are going to pay it.
Yep.
Do I have to buy that computer for $900? No, I can walk my ass right out of that store and be just as happy.
Yep.
Right. So anyway, continue with whatever I interrupted you on.
No, I mean, I think that was kind of my 2 cents on that negotiation piece was like, I agree that the transparency behind is from a listing side of things. When a seller, again, this all goes back to sellers. When the sellers, do they have to offer compensation to the buyer's agent? Yes or no? The answer is no. It has always been that way here in North Carolina. You did not have to offer. It was negotiable. You could put no on that. You can, hey, I only want to, Andrew, I'm hiring you to list my house. I'm only going to pay you. What is that fee for you to list my house? And then part of the agreement is, well, here's my fee. And again, some agents would say, well, part of my fee. And again, I think that's where the confusion comes down, because if you look at an actual seller CD, as far as who pays it, right? So I'm going to ask you, Andrew, who pays for the buyer's agent commission at the end of the day?
This is like this is a great question, because it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. What came first? All right, let's break it down. You're selling your house for $400,000. Okay. Obviously, you have things that you need to pay off. Maybe you don't have a mortgage. Maybe you have a mortgage. You got taxes. You got deed transfer fees. You got attorney fees. Things that go into the cost of selling your home that are not negotiable for the most part. You know, can't negotiate your taxes.
No, I wish.
But, you know, be nice, but what would the government tell you?
Yeah.
No, but you need to negotiate your fee. We're not. And we set them, by the way. You have no say in what happens. Sorry.
Or when it goes up.
We can go down so many different rabbit holes of this. And Mr. Buyer, Thomas over here, is going to come buy your house for $400,000. He agrees to pay that price. You listed it. He agrees. I don't care what the appraiser says, because technically, if you want to sell your house for $400 and he wants to buy it for $400 in a free market, that means it's worth $400,000, right? He sees the value in that. So he buys the house. He gets a loan. Let's say he's a VA buyer even. Right? He gets a loan for $400,000. Now he's got funding fees, things he has to pay included in that. But he's a veteran. We like that he does not have to put any down payment. And there are some other things that benefit him in that transaction. You love your veterans. You accept the offer. We don't have any appraisal things, no snafus. You go to the closing table. Okay. His loan was for $400,000. You sold your house for $400,000. You negotiated a 5% fee. That's easy math. $400,000. That's $20,000. Okay. The $20,000 of that deal were paid in commissions. Let's just go ahead and say you negotiated to split that half and half with the buyer's agent and yourself. So $10,000 on one side went to the buyer's agent at Colquitt Realty. $10,000 of one side went to the listing firm of All About You Realty, right? Because that's where they go first. Don't go to the agent. And your seller side of your CD was reduced $20,000, but it was reduced out of the $400,000 that Thomas paid you for the house.
Correct.
So it's kind of that question. Like, yeah, it came out of your side of the sale. It reduced your take home, but the $400,000 would have never been there if Thomas didn't get a loan for $400,000 and pay that $400,000. Right. So, in theory, you kind of both paid it, right? He's financing the house. And
again, I think that's where the confusion comes in, right? You know, because technicality is you're 100% right? But then you also got the other side of the table that says, well, what does the piece of paper say? The piece of paper on the CD says that the seller is on their side of the column as far as their fee that they pay for purchase or selling that house was both of the commissions, right?
Well, Brian, that's because they signed a listing agreement that you went over that said they wanted to do that up front, right?
Exactly. They agreed to that, right? They didn't want to. They didn't say, hey, they didn't go to Home Depot and purchase a 4-side-by-owner sign and stick it in the front yard. They chose to hire Andrew at All About You Realty and put his sign in the front yard, and they agreed to all of his fees, right?
Yeah.
Point blank. It was never required for them to hire Andrew. They agreed to that paperwork at the end of the day. And again, I think that's where this whole thing was just kind of like, and again, I think that's where we're only speaking from North Carolina perspective, but I think other states too is just like, I think that's where just like I'll say, again, I keep saying confusion, but how does a consumer not understand what they're signing? You know, in many different cases, you know, if you hire, most people know when they hire to sell a property, I don't think there's a consumer out there that would think that it's required for them to use an agent. I'd be shocked.
I would not think that either. And we'll wrap up on this. I think that is why the lawsuit is there. Now, we as agents have to understand that we can have that thought, and it's tough for you. And I know this. I know there's no fluff to this. I know it's tough for you to sit in that chair and honestly ask yourself the question, did my client not really understand that? Yep. And I feel the same way. And the answer is most likely they did understand that because you run your business at a high level and you do things the right way. But we can't assume that everybody did that.
Yep.
And the thing, again, that recently smacked me in the face is apparently I didn't do a good enough job at that either.
Yeah.
And I thought I did
right.
an outstanding job at that.
Yep.
So I think that we have to listen to the consumer in that facet. But for the agents that see this as this terrible thing, I think they need to change their mindset around it.
Yeah.
And for the consumers that think that this is just, oh my God, we're going to save all this money, you need to change your mindset around that too.
Yep.
And hopefully when all this gets washed out, and what I'm hearing is June and July, and we have a more clear-cut path of how real estate's going to be handled, that the consumer will have more options and better representation on both sides.
Yep.
And the agents that do the right things will prevail. Yep. And continue to have a career that they can excel at, that I think the general population needs. You know, I think that our value is justifiable in our marketplace. Yep. And if we're not here to do it on a hyper local level, and the consumer's relying on technology or internet or people that don't give a shit about them, they're going to be the ones that lose. So I want to thank you for being here. I've always appreciated how you've run your real estate business. You're a good dude. Support anything you got going on. And again, just thank you for sitting here and rambling on with me a little bit about this.
Likewise.
You know, Colquitt Realty out of High Point, correct? We didn't really talk too much about this.
Yep.
So High Point, just a good dude. Obviously, you know, competing firms, but I never mind competing with this gentleman. He does a really good job. I won't make his head any bigger than it already is. But thank you again for being here. Appreciate your time. Thank you guys for tuning in. Peace.
Likewise. Appreciate it.